Now that our media has been imported and properly organized, we're ready to begin the process of viewing the media, making selections, and editing the selections into the timeline to create the building blocks of our story, often referred to as a rough cut. Before we get into the nuts and bolts of editing, we need to discuss what Final Cut Pro calls a project. Projects are the primary containers for your work in Final Cut Pro. They are created and managed from within the project library. Projects are presented as horizontal film strips in the lower half of the interface. Moving your mouse pointer into any of the project film strips and dragging left or right will allow you to skim the contents of your project. Projects represent the sum total of your work in Final Cut Pro and include all edited video and audio clips that make up your story, including titles, transitions, and any applied effects. Projects are also associated with user-specified drives. As you can see in my project library, I have projects on both my internal hard drive and an external media drive called Ripple Production. Projects for each drive can be hidden or revealed by clicking the disclosure triangle next to the drive name. Regardless of the drive the projects live on, they all must exist in a folder called Final Cut Projects in order to be recognized by Final Cut Pro. By default, the Final Cut Projects folder is placed into the same directory as your Final Cut Events folder, which, as you'll recall, is the Movies folder of your home directory. Each time you launch Final Cut Pro, these folders are located, then the projects within them are displayed in the project library. This should tell you that every project you create will always be open and available whenever you open Final Cut Pro. You can have an unlimited number of projects displayed in the project library, but you can only work on one project at a time. To open a project, double-click on the film strip and it will open in a window called the timeline. To return to the project library, you can click the film reel icon in the lower left of the interface or use the keyboard shortcut Command-0. If you're coming from previous versions of Final Cut Pro, the concept of projects has been totally redefined. In Final Cut Pro 7 and earlier, projects were the master files for the sequences that represented your work. You could therefore have multiple sequences within one project. In Final Cut Pro 10, however, the concept of sequences has been done away with, as the project itself now functions as your sequence. As you can imagine, having all these projects open and available all the time will soon make your project library visually cluttered. To clean things up, you can create a folder by clicking the Create a New Folder button, then drag related projects into it. You can even name the folder to remind you of the project content. Creating folders is something I highly recommend in Final Cut Pro's new project scheme.